Welcome to Leaning In, a space for curious conversation and active engagement. I, Tanya Mikvitz,
and I, Jessica Lusty, invite you to lean into life together, exploring what it means to live into transformational practices in our day-to-day lives as we engage in relationships, family dynamics, our conditioning, and the narratives of dominant culture.
How do we actually embody change in our own lives and as a collective?
In this episode of Leaning In, we query our relationships with our existential aloneness alongside our ultimate interdependence. In this conversation, as it is woven with guided practice, we take up how a fear or avoidance of our aloneness can limit us, how within our cultural context moves towards authenticity can set us apart in ways that can feel uncomfortable and sometimes scary. How that can impact our ability to show up as authentically ourselves, and how bridging to our ultimate interconnectedness can support moves towards more sincere ways of being in the world.
Hi, Jessica. Good to see you.
You too, and welcome to everyone. Excited to be back in this space and to continue this conversation and the engagement that we are committed to this season, to work with a few themes, possibly others that come up, right, as we flow along, because that's the nature of this quality of being in relationship with ourselves and one another and the world, is that we're really tracking, right, what's alive, and how things ripple through, and how our systems and the world around us responds to where we're putting our attention and focus. So the last time we were together, Tanya, you did some really beautiful and deep work. And I just wanted to check in with you and see how that work you exemplified in that episode, how you've unpacked it in any ways, since we've been together, how it's tracked through your experience and engagements in the world.
Thank you, Jessica, for offering a check-in. Yeah, definitely a few things coming out of that. I mean, one, the most sort of immediate is definitely feeling, and I know you expressed this as we met last, that sense of exposing, being exposed, feeling vulnerable in the exposure of something that actually is very intimate and private work, and that we're stepping into putting it out there to share with all of you, which I still, like you said as well, stand by, but it's tender. And one of the things that as I was going back to the episode, was thinking, it's a curious way of accessing different parts of ourselves, that we come into sensation and imagery, and we sort of move beyond the thinking mind, the rational mind. But actually that is so powerful, and part of it is like our subconscious then also working, and that some of the work is the way it weaves is on that level as well. That it's not like we consciously go, oh, I went through this process, now the next time something comes up, yes, we might have a different kind of awareness of a trigger or a tendency within us, or how it feels in the body, so we know that something is happening. Like, for instance, I was doing work around this, this fiercely independent, strong part of myself, and it had a very physical manifestation in the work. So, so that is something I can track. Or if I feel this gripping, I know that this part of me is activated. But I also think that in the work, it sort of weaves in or moves in more unconscious levels, and sort of in a more subtle way as well. And that's where, whatever is coming up from our subconscious, or the imagery. I have this little creature that wanted to put on a yellow dress, and it can sound, I was sort of conscious of thinking, oh God, it can sound so weird and so strange, but it's so present when you're doing it. And and I had that slight sort of like, the kind of the hangover, the think of, oh, will people listen to this, and will they, just think it's strange if you haven't been in the process yourself. So that's definitely up for me a little bit. But I also assume that everybody who's tuning into this space is kind of open and curious, because a lot of the work is just driven by a curiosity, right? It's a curiosity about our existence and our experience in the world, and other people's experiences, and how it all relates. So that was up. And then, I think I definitely feel some shift in, and this is through continuous work as well as the process that we were in and shared with you all, tending to this very vulnerable place inside, which has been so oppressed and suppressed. I mean, in the work, it came up as feeling oppressed, but it's suppressed, it's repressed, it's a part that, for whatever reason, and we all have those parts, that wasn't okay to be with. It was, some messaging came along at some point which said, it's not okay for you to be this. So you become the other, and then you become very invested in being that other, the almost like the polar opposite. And of course, we all have a bit of everything. And when we start, and this as well, I think is such a key thing, is that if we look back to the piece of work I did, and it doesn't matter whether you tuned into that episode or not, is that there is also something that releases, which isn't just about the suffering, the pain, the repression, the darkness, but there was something really joyous. There's a part that's been oppressed, that's been, wants to play and wants to run in the meadows and wants to be joyous. And this is more and more that I do this work. I'm like, oh yeah, I want, it's like I'm releasing a very true, very innocent, very pure part of myself, which will help me feel more alive ultimately. So that's kind of like the goal at the end of the rainbow that you're looking for as you go through the dark, dark forest and can't find your way. And you're like, why am I doing this stuff again? Why am I showing up for this really hard work, and it's uncomfortable and I don't want to do it, and all of that. So so that's been moving through me. And then I think another piece which I'd be curious to continue the conversation around is, this sense of, because the theme of aloneness and loneliness came up, and I think a lot of that is because of the kind of culture we live in, when the separation, of course, but then also in tandem with that, there is also a reality of being alone as humans. And and that experience is also, there's parts of you and part of your experience which are always just going to be purely yours, which you're not going to be able to share, right? The way that your unique suffering works. Now we can find circumstances, and we find the touch points with other people of a shared experience, but there is also the fact that actually ultimately you are on your own. And and how do we hold both, and in the best kind of ways? It's just something I'm curious about.
Just sitting with all of that, I feel like my whole body, like they're just kind of opening up and relaxing a little bit, to just come back to what moved, and what is moving. And hold it with this kind of care around some of the bigger themes. And something that really like moved for me as you were talking, and knowing that you're a lover of story and myth and the fairy tale and the archetypal, the archetypal aspects of our lives that they're holding up for us to be with. And this theme of the capture of the innocence and the imprisonment of the innocence, the innocent part, the youthful part, that is present. I mean, when I say that way, some stories come to mind for you, but I'm thinking of Snow White, and I'm thinking of which of course moves back to other earlier stories. The Snow White that I know, right, that I'm most familiar with, or that most of us would be most familiar with, sort of the mainstream kind of presentation through Disney and that, but that story is, has a deeper piece. I mean, or more, ancient origins that are carrying that forward. And I'm thinking about but just, and some may be coming mind for others. I'm curious if anything's coming up for you, but that piece around, those parts of us that are innocent and open and joyful, and those becoming somehow captured or captive, and that there is sometimes a journey that needs to be gone through to release it, but there's some process, right? And sometimes there's something that needs to be found or revealed, a certain thing needs to be found, but there's some experience that unlocks, that, and allows for the freedom. So I appreciate just feeling into that as you're describing how you're experiencing that very personally and idiosyncratically in your own work, right? And in the places that when you open up to be with this, your psyche is leading you, and the imagery and the things that are coming forward for you. And then the way that is the way you're experiencing that on those more subtle levels of, okay, this is the piece of me that is really knocking on the door, so to speak, to be released.
I was thinking when you were saying, oh, what stories come to mind? And I'm thinking of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
And being sort of enticed by the sweetness and the beauty and the gorgeousness of the outside, and then captured on the inside by this being. So yeah, just wanted to add to that.
Yeah, and that brings up for me this piece of, the kind of like, as you were talking about the loneliness, and it's interesting that you brought that up, because, we're in this together, and that was sort of work you were doing, but in the time that's intervened between that recording and this one, this topic has come up a lot, like talking with people who are describing massive discomfort with being alone. Or also I can think of another conversation I had where there was this thing of like, wow, I'm really recognizing that my capacity to truly be with someone else and enter in a way where, I don't know if you're not looking, you can see my hands, but where you can come in and come so close that you can be in this most intimate sort of face-to-face, full-bodied, so to speak, like where you're available fully in relationship to someone else, which to me is sort of like, that is the what I long for. And I think it's the most, it's the fullest expression that we can hope for, that's actually healthy, because if we are like, not kind of, if we're not honoring that space that's in between us and letting that space between us be the place where we can fully open up to availability for presence to who the other person is fully, right? Absent our projections, and we can never get to that entirely, right? But the best possible hope for that, rather than like the enmeshment. Like right now, my hands are like, where they're like, my fingers are enmeshed, and it's like, this sense where we become so sort of, we're bringing so much of our own everything into the interaction, and that we can't actually be right fully with what is ours. We can't be fully with what the other person is offering or bringing, or even approximating a fullness, because there's so much that we're kind of clinging into and for, because honoring and really like having done our own work around what it means to come to terms with the ultimate aloneness, right? The existential, and everything's a paradox, right? Because of course, part of what led to that in the last episode was that, you're thinking about this in different ways, was, the thread of interdependence that we're always talking about. So in a way, we're like, it's tricky, right? Because we're so interdependent and interwoven with everything that really there is no separation. And yet at the same time, it's the both and, right? Consciousness. It's not an or, it's an and, right? And ultimately, there are aspects of our experience that we might most so desperately want to be understood in, right? For me, I can remember as a teenager just being like, I just want someone else to be able to see the world through my eyes, like longing for that intimacy of like being able to share the perspective fully, so you can be accompanied in it. And we can approximate that, we can get super close, but we can never truly get there, right? And I think that to take that up for me anyway is, and I'm in this, process and transformation in the context of my life where both kids are going off to pursue their independence. And then I'm separating from the person I've been living with and building life with, and sharing that journey with since 2000 we met, and been together formally since 2021, I guess. And I'm feeling into this like piece of stepping back into a different kind of aloneness and independence that I'm very eager for and I crave. And yet I don't fully know, right, what will come up in that space for myself, once I'm in it. Yeah. So.
And there's something I just wanted to pick up on there, what you were saying, it's this, the difference between sort of being connected, but then we are ultimately living and having to act from our own experience. So like what came to me is like my daughter told me this morning, she's like, yeah, but you don't understand because you haven't done the exams, she's had a period of exams. And I'm like, well, actually, I have, might have been a very long time ago, but there was this, I could really feel her in this sense of aloneness, loneliness in her experience right now, because it doesn't matter. Even she's like, but you haven't done it right now. And I think what she's reaching for is like, I'm alone in this and it's really, really hard and I can't give it to you and you can't take it from me and I can't ultimately really share it with you because it's so mine.
Right.
So we can have like a shared touching points. And I think that's the same with, for me, when my mum died, which, actually yesterday marked 35 years ago. So it's a long time ago. Um, but I guess it's in my awareness more perhaps for that marking of yesterday's anniversary. Um, was that total experience so viscerally, so intensely of I am alone in this, because none of we were all grieving in my family, and I have family members, close by, like there, I wasn't alone, but my experience was, oh, I am lonely and alone in this. Nobody can understand. And it's sort of, I think it dropped into me, that understanding of ultimately we are alone. But I think what's interesting is that, so there is something about being able to get close to your aloneness which allows for the deeper connection.
And I think that the we're, the other thing to add in bringing in the cultural piece that always feels very important to me is that I was not brought up being trained, being educated, and having practiced with being and with opportunity to practice any sort of skills or ways of being in relationship, with presence, with what comes up when I'm quiet, navigating any of the challenging feelings. There was not an education around how to be with those aspects of being here and being alive and being in a human body. The training that I received was very much, about how to survive. Like, we went back to like that, the scarcity mentality that informs so much that is foundational about how we relate to ourselves and to one another and to the world, was how to conform and shape myself to survive and be quote unquote, successful in the world, right? Which I have thrown off a lot of that in, like, there was a part of me that just sort of inherently rejected like so much of what was being edified and elevated as the way things are. This is the way things are. This is just the way things are. And you have to learn how to, and, as a parent, when I find myself dropping into that rationale with my kids, I'm really like, it's tricky because of course it's an and, right? I want to work, and this is why I'm investing in this. I want to work towards a world where the way things are is more expansive. It's more diverse. There's more ways of being and doing and relating than the ones that were proscribed and prescribed to me, ways you cannot relate to one another and the ways you must relate to one another, in order to, be successful. And I use that term like in a very conventional way, but also in a broad way. Be successful in relationship, be successful in, business, be, or the financial aspects of life, be successful, even in the spiritual aspects of life is why I rejected the dogmatic sort of systems that I was handed, because they weren't relational. They were also proscriptive and prescriptive. If you do these certain things, if you believe these certain things, then you're successful as a spiritual religious person. And that even came into the yoga, right? I mean, that whole world. I remember when I came back from my Shivananda, such a deep ashram based, early training. I was in my early 20s, and then coming back and finding the world, the way that the spaces where yoga was being offered here in Washington, D.C., feeling so like that they had taken this beautiful philosophy, and system for being and thinking about who we are and being in relationship, such a complex, system of teachings and practices, and sort of like narrowed it down to what conformed to, you know, these things I was talking about a minute ago, of like what makes success in this cultural space, in this cultural place. And then that was what I was experiencing. And I rejected it very strongly and felt very alienated, in trying to be a deep practitioner, in a world of within which I felt that so much was being, the understanding, what the application was so narrow, in the sense of conforming to those, to those kind of the cultural, mainstream American, uh, things. So, for me, there was a profound aloneness in that. And I think my comfort with my aloneness, has been born through those kinds of experiences of choosing another way and feeling alienated within that choice. And going back to the theme that I have brought into this summer, right, is how that then has impacted my capacity to fully show up and share, from this place, and feel a sense that there is space and there is a welcome and there is a reception for that. Because I have felt very, I think that's a piece of this for me, this sense of like feeling othered and alone in occupying my authenticity.
Yeah, just before you named that as part of your work, I was like, oh, this is it's moving right in there. And yeah, very interesting to see. And how are you feeling now with those pieces? And this journey from, we went into some of the work in that in our a couple of episodes ago as we started this season. And what is moving for you with that right now?
Well, I think the only way to find that out is to drop a little deeper, because I don't think my mind can make that.
No, let's do it from within, which is the way we like to roll in this space. So just allow yourself to settle in. And for those of you who are listening and really bearing witness, also just allow yourself a slight shift in the way you take in and listen. Maybe a more wholehearted, open, receptive kind of listening from your whole being. Like we're moving not just from our minds, but from our whole being. Yeah. So Jess, I can see you just moving out your neck and settling in. And yeah, it's a nice bigger and fuller breath in and out. And allow the sort of the conversation and the ideas to settle a little. And we'll move straight into some incomplete sentences. As I sit here in this moment, what's most present in my body is
There's this, like, I feel very like settled in some way. I feel my belly full and open. I feel my back and my feet on the floor, and my back sort of, there's a groundedness, and I want to say a heaviness, but it's not a heaviness that's like, that feels, it's like I don't feel weighted down. I just feel like really settled in.
So holding this and feeling into also this part of you that feels on the outside and othered. If this steady, grounded part of me could speak to the part that feels othered, what it would say is,
I see you, and I really understand and honor the many and varied, interactions and messages and circumstances that sort of built up that sort of sense of, in order to be in your, what was true for you, that there was this way you had to be alone, and that there was not a companionship in that.
Imagine now that you can shift yourself more into this other part of you that's felt on the outside, not seen, that has stepped out of some of those bigger circumstances, just out of necessity. Imagine yourself speaking back to this part that is steady and grounded. What I need from you is
reassurance, and to lend me your strength, to hold me with care, and just know that I'm here. There's still alongside you, this stronger and more settled and strengthened aspect. There's still this very vulnerable, and there's a feeling that it's like hard to describe, but like this, just being like, there's this part that feels like what there's just this profound sense of rejection of, and just like being, what keeps coming is like being a square, like that there's the square peg in a round hole kind of feeling.
Yeah. The wisdom that this sense of not fitting and being on the outside and being rejected, the wisdom this part of me carries is,
well, this is the capacity to feel, to derive my to my sense of belonging in the greater world, in the like natural world. I think that's the gift that I've been given for this.
Yeah. What I'm feeling in my body right now is,
feeling more of a, like, now there's this warmth in my belly, and there's a little bit of like it's almost like I can feel that younger, that sort of, that part of me that it's like is still sort of like in the earlier work is coming back, sort of hiding behind that, that stronger part of me, more mature part of me. Is like, and now she's like sitting on my lap, and I feel this kind of warmth of like holding that part of me in this more settledness, in this strength, in this kind of, it's like this, like, again, it's coming back to this sense of the belongingness that's really founded in, it's like I feel like I'm being held by this place and all the beings here and the earth in the intelligence of life. And then I'm able to derive this deeper strength from that and hold this still shaky, vulnerable, like nervous, like just like part of me that's been outcast, or yeah, the words are just not the right words, but I know the feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just holding her, and she's able to just relax into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So breathe with this feeling, the feeling that is also beyond words. This little young Jessica who's come from peeking behind now to sit and be held in your lap, and is warm and settling, relaxing a little bit more. And you held by all the spirits and all the beings, the natural world, the mystery. Just feeling this wrapping around from behind and forwards. As I feel into this place and this feeling, I know I am really ready for
Comes as like the next steps, stepping forward.
what I'm ready to step into is
Yeah, the unknown, the sort of next, the opportunities that I really, I'm praying for, in a very broad sense of that word of prayer, just really like hoping to experience that allow me to live into my desires and the dream of, of collaborations and creating more connection and beauty and healing and, the fundamental change. Like,
yeah, beautiful. So just hold that with your breath for a few moments. Maybe feel yourself come back into your body. And for those of us who are bearing witness, we can also feel into that sense of what we're wishing and dreaming for. The next steps, however small, whether it's just what's happening next in the day or in the week or in the month or in the year or in our lives. And Jessica, just allow yourself to take your time to come back and return. I had such a strong imagery as you were saying, like stepping into the unknown, and I just kept seeing the Fool from the tarot deck, which is number 0 in the major arcana, and it's this character who's about to step off the precipice, but is looking up and is carrying like a little like a stick with a little wrap of, belongings. I'm not sure if it's got an actual name, and there's a little dog next to it, but and it's beautiful, and there's like a yellow background. So it's like stepping off the precipice, but with this beautiful innocence as well of not knowing what's going to come next, but being ready to step. So I just wanted to share that was what came up for me as you moved into that. But that was such incredibly beautifully felt imagery that you brought through for all of us to bear witness to. So really deep gratitude to you for sharing. How do you feel?
thank you for your guidance. Yeah, I feel the things that I expressed, in the guidance and the responses that were coming. And it's like I've been saying, I noticed in a little practice I offered through my newsletter last week, this this piece of like how these practices, when taken up with consistency, there's ways that we notice the shifts. And I think you alluded to this earlier, that are more conscious. And then there's just like these little felt senses of how we are feeling in relationship to our experience and ourselves in the world, right? And it's more subtle, and it's like that's where I feel like, and maybe it's because, you know, this work, I think, is these modalities are taking us into places and bringing more attentiveness and nuance to our relationship with life, with ourselves, that perhaps new language needs to be created, right? Like that can express what we're experiencing and feeling, because you know we're in new territory in some ways, and that the language that is used to articulate, like what I was describing before, the system, you know, that most of us have been asked to conform to, you know, that language reinforces that system. So yeah, and just for the people who are here with us, I would just love to, you know, if you've been in this, just to take a moment and for yourself, just feel into whatever capacity you have. If you're in a space where you can really pause, if you've been moving around listening to this, you know, if you can pause, if you can just sit, if you're in a car driving, you know, can just kind of open your awareness, but stay with what you are, but feel into the next few sentence stems that I'm going to offer, and just notice. You can complete them out loud or inside of yourself if that feels more accessible. And just taking a few moments and checking in, like being with your own, turning your awareness towards your felt sense of yourself, your body, your energy, emotions. You can complete the following incomplete sentences. What I feel in response to the journey that Tanya led Jessica through is the parts of me that need that level of care and support that Tanya was guiding Jessica to offer. The parts of me that need that care and support are what it is that I would step into if those parts of me were really held and cared for. What I would step into is just take a few breaths and feel into the back of your body and your seat, and that part of you that is there, that supports the more vulnerable parts. Just honoring both in this moment, like recognizing that you, as I do, have both. You have that supportive and strong and grounded maturity that you've earned through your life experience, and you still have those younger parts of you, a little more vulnerable, a little perhaps less less resourced, and just feeling in the presence of both, and the capacity to be in relationship, to bring them more into relationship. And then just take a breath or two. And yeah, thank you, Tanya. I really feel that that is so much the essence of this work. And I really think the way you guided me really brought that. It's like we were talking about earlier, like that, what the space within which two people or two, the different aspects of ourselves can be together and can be in conversation, and what comes out of that is something other than, right? Mm-hmm. When two people are in relationship, something else is born through the connection. And when we are in relationship with parts of ourselves that we may have been neglecting or denying or repressing or ignoring or shaming or blaming or whatever, something else can be born.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was really beautiful guidance. Thank you for your capacity to come out of your own work and move to guide all of us. And this also, I feel, sort of illustrates this beautiful way that we are sharing and we are connected and we're relating to each other from quite a profound place. And yes, we are all in our own unique experience, but if we can lean in as we are into that connection and shared space and holding each other within it, it's the existential aloneness and loneliness becomes so much more bearable. And we can also develop the capacity to be in an intimacy with that. And it doesn't have to be so painful, I think. So it's like I'm seeing like an infinity sign weaving between the two. Thus, this absolute interconnectedness and interdependence, and then into that place of the aloneness, and how it moves between the two.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and I, as we're bringing this to a close, it's really in my heart in this moment, how essential it is to attend to this for so many reasons. And I think one of the reasons that's the most present to me in this moment is because I guess I've had a couple of conversations with some young women who are in concern for some other young women in their lives about being in abusive relationship. And I think that the capacity to be with ourselves, that in several of these cases, it was very clear that there was just this deep terror almost about being alone. And that it was like the avoidance, that the avoidance of having to be with oneself was the deepest factor in staying in, there's obviously, as anyone who has been in one or has been intimate with someone who has, there are a lot of factors that go into why we sustain relationships that are abusive. But I think that this piece, if we can attend to this really deeply, I think there is a freedom that will that can support us to address the other reasons and factors, right? Why we would stay within a context in which we are not being honored and not being cared for and really being harmed. So yeah, just was in my heart as we're closing here, and just sending love and support to anyone who is feeling that and experiencing that, both within the context of themselves or in close relationship, because that was part of what was being discussed. Is it's very, very hard to love someone who is in a relationship where they're being harmed. Yeah.
feeling that. And thank you. Let's continue to show up for each other and be there in all the ways that we can, and be in this work that we show up for ourselves and the different parts for ourselves more and more, so we can attend to the same in each other in a real and true way. So thank you, everybody, so much for being here with us. As always, feel free to get in touch through all the platforms and media if you have reflections, comments, things that are stirring for you. We really also want to open it up, that if there is something that is then moving forwards from what we might have shared that you would love to explore further, just come and chat with us in one way or another. We're here for it. That's what this is all about. So ending here, and look forward to being with you next time. Thank you, Jessica, as always, for being so willing and open and diving deeply, as well as for your beautiful embodied wisdom.
Thank you, Tanya. Same back to you. Bye, everyone. We appreciate your presence in this space. If you sense that friends, family, or peers would benefit from leaning in, please share.
If an episode speaks to you in a particularly meaningful way, or raises questions that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can connect with us here on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram at leaning_in_.
Leaning In is produced by Tanya Mikwitz and Jessica Lusty. The beautiful music you hear here is provided by Masood Ali Khan. Our sound engineer is Marley Mikwitz Montgomery.